Hi everyone and welcome to my review of Casino Royale, the 21st James Bond film, and it's directed by Martin Campbell once again. And this is a film that I've been looking forward to reviewing for ages now. On this Bond rewatch, I've been really anticipating, sharing my thoughts on this film, purely because it's one of my favourite films of all time. I say it now, it's in my top 100 films of all time, and I don't see it leaving that anytime soon, because I've seen a lot of films now, a lot of classics as well. I think it's a firm, member of my top 100, along with two other Bond films. But this is maybe you could say, yeah, it is the most popular Bond film overall. If you take into account the critical acclaim and the box office success. And also just the way people on polls and rankings, how highly they regard this film. It's usually, most of the time, this film, more than any other Bond, appears at the top, along with maybe Goldfinger. And now I think it's more popular than Goldfinger and GoldenEye and all these Bonds. It's the most, it's the highest regarded on IMDb as well. It's one of the only Bonds I think that was in the top 250. For good reason. There's only one other Bond film that really is on the level of this in terms of how perfectly it's constructed and how human it is, and just how much of a cinematic achievement it is, really, for me anyway. There's a fairly close third Bond film, but really the top two Bonds is this and another Bond, and they're fairly close for me. I've still not really decided which one I prefer. When I do my ranking, it will be either this or another Bond that's my absolute, on my top spot. At the time, Daniel Craig got quite a lot of hate in the press and everything. People were just not seeing him being Bond at all, and maybe he was made out he was going to be this, maybe another George Lazenby. Who I absolutely loved as Bond, but he wasn't popular, and he only done the one Bond, and people thought Daniel Craig would be like Lazenby, but once the film hit the cinemas, pretty much everyone changed their mind. There are still some who don't like Daniel Craig, but generally he is along with Connery now the most popular Bond actor, and really for me he's a very close second to Sean Connery. I still think Connery is the best Bond, overall he was the best Bond, and the best actor actually that played Bond, because overall as well, films like The Last Crusade and The Untouchables, he's a legendary actor, and but Daniel Craig, as Bond, is a close second, and he brings most of the things that Connery brought to the table, maybe a bit more of a darker Bond. But he's more of the ruthless Bond like Connery was. But also, he's got the charm still. He's got the coolness. And there's a hints of Roger Moore actually. Just some of the expressions he does when there's more of the humorous stuff coming into play. I think, he takes a little bit maybe from Roger Moore. And I know one of his favourite Bond's films, I think, was Live and Let Die. So maybe he did take a few things from Roger Moore, but he's closer to Sean Connery, I think, and them two are for me the ultimate Bonds, definitely. And this film as well, it's one of the most human Bonds. Really the only other one that's just as human as my other pick for the best Bond. And just the way that this film is more of a character study, and it focuses more on human emotions, and it shows the vulnerability of Bond. The less experience, because of course it is it's a prequel, it's a reboot thing where this is how Bond came into play, how he became 007, and it tries to show him less experience. Even in one of the early on action scenes, you can see that he's not quite the master of, he's not quite mastered his art, and the parkour scene in particular, he's fallen about all over the place in parts, and I think that's great that it shows Bond isn't untouchable in this film, and that in this film he comes close to death, quite a few occasions, and I think that adds more of a believability as well, and just portraying him more of a real flawed human, not just an unstoppable agent, which not obviously all the Bonds do, but this more is in line with that, more of a human Bond film, and actually showing his character more. And the opening scene, while it's not the absolute best Bond opening scene, it's one of the best. It's absolutely stunning, and it sets the dark tone that this film has, and it's ruthless, but the way it leads into the titles and the twist it does on the gun barrel. I know some people don't like it, but for me, it's probably my favourite gun barrel in the way that it just, it's in relation to what came before, and in that transition into the to the titles, and it just comes straight at you, and it just, the blood comes down in a perfect way. But I don't think any of the other Daniel Craig Bond, title sequences ever come close to doing this with the gun barrel and even the title sequence. I think they're actually quite poor in terms of the gun barrel, and for the most part, I really like the Skyfall titles, but Spectre and Quantum of Solace, they're not up to scratch really. But this one is absolutely stunning, and the title sequence, only beaten by Goldfinger really for me, and even then it's a close one for these opening titles. Absolutely stunning, and the song that plays by Chris Cornell, who recently passed, unfortunately. That song, You Know My Name, such an underrated Bond song. Most people don't like it for a Bond, on lists of best Bond themes and stuff. It's never really thought of much. I think it's one of the absolute best, and I think it's an epic ballad that just really just fits this film perfectly, and on its own, it's just a stunning song. A great modern rock song, and these titles, as I say, are designed so perfectly, and in the way it comes back again and links into the actual film, the actual beginning of the film, it's 007. It's absolutely masterful, and that's what you're meant to do. None of these sequences, the opening scene and the titles are as much just on their own. They're part of the film, part of the experience for me, and the way that it just all links together seamlessly is masterful. Then you've got some of the opening action scenes which are absolutely masterful. The parkour scene, people even study it in colleges and that, film school and that. It's an absolutely stunning action scene. It would actually be bettered in this film, which is saying something, but this scene where he's chasing the guy up the crane and everything, and all this parkour, the way it's been put together, it's some of the best action in cinema actually, and not just the 21st century, but of all time. It's absolutely stunning, and just how it's been edited, and how both Bond and the guys chasing, how they the different balances of power within this chase and these fights shift is quite something really, and just the actual how dynamic it is and how intense this scene is has really been topped really in recent memory. And I think, along with On Her Majesty's Secret Service and GoldenEye, this overall, that from start to finish, this film has the best action in the series, and it's also visceral and just perfectly shot and edited. Nothing else to say there really. But this film, it's about the main villain is Le Chiffre, and he's played by Mads Mikkelsen, who's a masterful actor. Very underrated actor, undervalued. Not much people see a lot of his films, but for example, The Hunt, that's an absolutely stunning film, and he's masterful in that. Not too much people have seen that, but in this film, he's one of the best Bond villains, of all time, and he's basically he's a banker to these terrorists, and you know, he plays a lot of poker and stuff, and really in the middle act of the film, and the main centerpiece of the film, is this massive poker game that he's involved in, and Bond's got to try and stop him, basically, so he doesn't finance the terrorists and such. But early on, you see him trying to investigate. You go into different locations, basically trying to see who's behind all this. And you've got some great chases before they meet, even at the airport. Another great action scene. The scenes in this film, they almost top themselves, the action, or at least remain just as good. And yeah, you've got that airport sequence, and then shortly after that is the main centerpiece of the film, as I say, and it's this poker game. Probably the best poker game I've ever seen in cinema. Just the way that you know all the characters and what's going on there, all the motivations. Well, aside from Mads Mikkelsen's character, it's still a bit of mystery surrounding him, but yeah, you know most of the motivations. All the characters in this film are involved in that poker scene, and the way it's filmed is just so intense, and what happens in between it, when they have their breaks, it's masterful. The way they mix all the scenes to build up to suspense, and maintain it throughout, quite a prolonged sequence, really. Absolutely masterful. Martin Campbell was a master when directing this film. The way he brings everything together, and the way that all the action scenes at the beginning and the end, they're built around this centerpiece, and the way just every act flows and kind of tops itself. The last act is even better than the first and the second, and that's really when the emotions really hit, and it all comes together. But yeah, I've never really seen, apart from my number one film, a director who's in such control of a Bond film, and really just knows how to achieve his vision, and make it come together. The film, and this film comes together perfectly. But the rest of the supporting cast as well. Eva Green, who plays Vesper Lind, for me the second best Bond girl of all time. Only beaten by Diana Rigg in On Her Majesty's Secret Service, and she's just brilliant in this film, and absolutely flawless chemistry and everything with Daniel Craig, and you've also got, of course, Mads Mikkelsen. He's flawless. You've got Judi Dench as M, returns, but she's not got a massive part in this film. But yeah, she's great again in this film. As I've said before, the best M actor. You've got Jeffrey Wright, who plays Felix. He makes a return in this film, and you've got Mathis as well. He's another character that kind of helps Bond out with certain things and information. And the supporting cast are just flawless in this film. You've got one of the absolute best villains. You've got the second best Bond girl, and all these characters as well. The side ones like Felix, the sense of charm. And camaraderie, you could say, as well, between him and Bond, and it just adds something to the experience. While Bond is on his own for a lot of the film, which is usually when Bond is at his best, he's also got these scenes with these side characters, and they're never weak. They never get in the way. But then once that that romance comes together, which for me is one of the best in cinema, certainly in modern cinema. It's absolutely, it hits you really hard, and yeah, the romance in this film, wow. The way that I felt the emotions, and the connection between the two, and just the way that plays out, and she kind of like a foil, but also, for Bond's character, shows the vulnerability, but also on her own as well, quite vulnerable. They have that connection there, but on her own as well, just a great character. A flawed and deep character, masterfully written as well. The script in this film is absolutely stunning. We'd have the next film would be Quantum of Solace, and that's got one of the weakest scripts. written by 5 different people for that film. But this one is such a focused script. All the characters are developed so masterfully through the script. It's absolutely stunning, and definitely one of the best Bond scripts, for sure. And the cinematography in this film is superior. As I say, all the action's been shot masterfully. But the exotic parts, at the beaches and stuff, and yeah, all these scenes in Venice as well at the end. That's some of the best shot scenes I've seen of the century. And just the way he captures the different locales, and as well the atmosphere he creates in these Martin Campbell, in these poker scenes. I could not floor the way this film is shot. Shot, directed, and edited to perfection. Not a single note that is that is weak. Every single act, every single scene, every single frame really is just perfect. And the music to this film as well throughout the film. It's not got the main Bond anthem theme really until the end. But throughout the film, the rendition, the instrumental of "You Know My Name," and also just the overall score of this film is absolutely stunning. One of the best in Bond for sure. Could not floor that. And as well, this film, it doesn't have these things straight away like the traditional gun barrel or the Bond anthem playing throughout different bits. But Die Another Day done that, and that was a complete disaster. This film, what it done was it earned its status as a true Bond, a classic Bond, while not necessarily appearing, straight away as a traditional Bond with all these things going on. It did, however, have the ingredients there without not being obvious. All the things that make Bond, the action standards, the romance, just the locales as well. But when Bond is at his best, the human side of Bond, I think, and his romance, the way that the romance brings out in him, and it's got one of the best villains as well. So this really is just, and the way it comes together, it ends with the Bond anthem playing in a particular scene. Really, this is about how Bond became Bond, and the way that they don't use the theme until the very end. And then when that happens, that hits you even more for me. And the way that comes together with the anthem and the line, it's absolutely stunning. I just get complete, goosebumps every time that happens. And it's just true vision, from the director and everyone involved, about how to, reboot this franchise, but still have all the elements there. That make Bond, legendary, and just bring it all the way, to the end, and never compromising, the vision, and just fully, to pander to, fans of the franchise, and just bringing it, one of the absolute greatest Bonds. And this is a Bond film that I've seen more than most of them, and every time I'm finding new things in this film. And just the subtle parts of the score as well by David Arnold. I think this is probably his best scored Bond, maybe, and just the way that all the subtle bits, within the romance scenes in particular, just create that, that atmosphere and that just that beauty as well of that romance is something else. The final act of the film, we've mentioned the other ones. The final act is just stuff of legends. The way it comes together, and the twists and that, but also the things that I felt in the final act in particular. Really, this is along with my number one pick, the most moving Bond. The way this film moved me, but then as well, at the same time, straight after that made me feel, this epic feel of Bond, and just carrying on. It's masterful. It ends in such a way that it's just absolutely legendary. Probably one of my favourite endings to film, along with my number one Bond. That's also in one of my favourite endings. But the way this comes together, as I say, and that Venice action scene, wow. Some of the best action put to film. Manages to top the opening. The opening action sequences, the parkour scenes. Absolutely stunning. All the layers, the building collapsing, and then mixed in with the stakes and what happened. The character moments there, the emotions, and the way that affects Bond. Is really like no other Bond apart from my other number one. My other favourite Bond film. But yeah, the way it balances the action and the emotion. That's absolutely masterful. There's not much else to say about this film. It's flawless. It's got some of the greatest action of all time throughout, from start to finish. It earns its right perfectly as a Bond film, while being a completely unique film, and a massive step up. From Die Another Day, for me the worst Bond film ever made. The change, to this Bond, they went back to Martin Campbell, GoldenEye, another one of the absolute best, and he once again delivered. He reinvented the franchise, but made another masterpiece for me. But this goes further, than some of the other masterpieces of Bond, and further than GoldenEye, because the human emotions and the human understanding is far greater than pretty much every Bond film ever made. And while I don't think Mads Mikkelsen is quite the best Bond villain, I'll be talking about that soon. He's one of probably the top three, I would say, Bond villains, and his performance in this film is chilling. He's kind of he's a very flawed villain, like, in the sense that you kind of feel sorry for him in parts, but yeah, he is ruthless and he doesn't care about anyone. As long as he gets, he survives. As highlighted in a couple of the scenes around that poker set piece. And yeah, you've got an absolutely stunning villain, Bond girl, one of the best side characters, and this is such a tightly focused plot as well. Every scene of every act has a narrative momentum that just drives the film more than pretty much every other Bond film ever made. As I say, the music in this film is flawless. The way the score is used to portray different emotions, and as well the action scenes, the way that the sound design is on them, could not flaw at all. This is a mind-blowing film, and as I say, it's one of my favourite films of all time, top 100 for sure, and it sits among the three Bond films that I'll probably, they're very firm, can stay in my top 100, and yeah, overall I'll give this film 100% plus, tier 1. I didn't even give that to GoldenEye. This is one of the, if you go through my reviews, you'll know which other Bond is a tier 1, which is basically my highest rating, apart from the bonus tier, which is tier S. I've not actually reviewed any films that have got that rating yet. That's like an extra special rating. That's for the absolute magnum opuses of cinema. But that doesn't underplay the tier 1s. This is a masterpiece, and still, like some of the tier S's, among the greatest films of all time for me. I could sit with a person who thinks Citizen Kane's the best film ever made, or whatever. And it's a masterful film, Citizen Kane. But I could argue basically how I think this film is actually better. And just because again it's a blockbuster, does not downplay its merit artistically. And the way that this film is designed is absolutely flawless, and the way it elevates, as much as it entertains, or more than it entertains for me, the way it elevates you with that human understanding and them connections within the film, the romance, is why it's one of the greatest films ever made for me. And you know, it's a better action film than Die Hard for me, and that's saying something. It's one of the absolute greatest action films, and you know, just a masterpiece of cinema, a true masterpiece, and you know, complete vision throughout this film that is achieved, has pulled off to absolute perfection. This is always a film that's talked about as one of the best or the best, and agreed. Cannot flaw this film, and it goes above and beyond what one action film or Bond film really can be. I'll be surprised if they top this. You know, it will be very hard to top this film. Like you know, the top three in particular Bonds. Very hard to top this film, and even Skyfall, as a spoiler, didn't top this, and that was absolutely stunning, which we'll get to. But before that, we'll be doing Quantum of Solace, which is a massive step down from this film, and a real disappointment. A film that I didn't really, I'll talk about it more in depth, but yeah, I didn't care for. But Casino Royale, an absolute masterpiece, tier 1, 100% plus. One of my favourite films, and you know, a true. This is one of the Bond standard going forward. It reinvented and it elevated me beyond most certainly action films I've ever done. So thanks for watching my review. Next up is Quantum of Solace, and check out my other reviews at my channel. So Casino Royale, a masterpiece. Thanks for watching.